We're up. Okay, brilliant. So, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. Hello. So just to let you know, okay, everyone, that our seminars are about to begin literally within the next 5 minutes, okay? So I just want to make a quick announcement about where people need to go and where they need to be, okay? So if you're in the following seminars, if you are booked onto Roadmap to Scale or crowdfunding, that would be in this here auditorium. We'll be getting going in literally 2 or 3 minutes' time. If you are up for some investment readiness advice or advice on pitching, make your way across out into the sunshine and where the gentleman is pointing to you to go, and you'll find those seminars across the way. So this is your 2-3 minute warning tops. Thank you. Okay. Okay, we're on. Cool. Good afternoon, everybody. Seriously? Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you. Jesus. Right. Okay, cool. Great to see you all back for the afternoon session. I'm loving the buzz in the room. If I could ask everybody to think about where they need to be now. Okay, so there's a seminar across the way that's just about to kick off. Okay, with Ascension Ventures, Jean de Fougerolles on investment readiness. But here, in the main auditorium, we're very pleased to welcome back Mr. Jason Langford-Brown, who's going to talk to you about his roadmap to scale. Jason, after you.
Hi, can I very quickly, can we just all come in? Yeah, come in. So we'll just fill up around this front section. That would be great. Everybody hear me okay? No? Okay, we'll go with the mic still. I was hoping we could get everyone tighter and we can talk. Okay, so welcome back. I'm going to expand on some of the stuff we talked about this morning. So some of the slides will be repetitive, but really just that's an opportunity within the time limits we've got. Chance for you to maybe ask a few questions. I'm happy to field a few questions and a bit of discussion as we go through this. I'm going to need to obviously curtail it to a point because we're not going to get through in only half an hour. But then there's a few new things I just wanted to do just to expand on some of the stuff we talked about this morning as well. So was everyone here this morning? Yeah, cool. Okay. So what we talked about was this whole philosophy of being an entrepreneur is not enough. So I'm not going to re-go over that. So the first thing that was talked about, actually Andy mentioned it with his £1 billion vision. Dave talked about it a lot in terms of his Nepal horizon of mountains. There's nowhere you're going. Okay. And this is a really simple thing that I just see so many people forget about. So this is what a normal business cycle looks like. It's never changed. It doesn't change anymore. Only difference probably between now and years ago and maybe in between industries today is that the length of time it takes some companies and some markets to go through their cycle of startup growth, being sustainable, transforming or dying, which is kind of what tends to happen, has just been squeezed a little bit. But the point is the same. And the reason I put that up is I see so many businesses as they start to move into scale up that only look at the big end, that mountain right in the horizon. Okay, and that can be a long way off for some people. And what you need to do is you need to be really realistic, as Dave said about surviving. So where are you today realistically? Are you still in startup mode? Are you starting that journey of growth? Have you been on a period of growth? Now you need to manage that growth. And what's going to be your near horizon, your near mountain, is going to be the stepping stone to that longer term horizon. Okay, so it's just a message just to think that through, because I just see so many companies just big visions, big goals, and just not really understanding the gap between where they are now and where they're going. Okay, and I think you need a bit of sanity in terms of what's our next stepping stone on that journey. Okay, so all about being outcome focused. You need to have outcomes. We talked this morning about being agile. I'm going to skip through the video again because you've all seen it. I was just very interested, just quickly, there's just a few thoughts about this model. Any thoughts on this model from this morning that resonate with anybody? Anybody want to share any thoughts? Yeah. How do you create it? I think it's what I was talking about in terms of it's a journey. It's a continuous journey, doing a lot of what could be seen as quite boring stuff. But it's that rigor and discipline in building a strong business with strong disciplines and strong processes and systems that gives you that backbone. So we're going to touch on that again in a second. Okay. So I showed you this morning as well, which was just these stats that just show that 70% of the healthiest companies are agile. So the healthiest companies aren't these dynamic startups. They're actually the agile companies, that balance of stability and dynamism. And this is just from that same piece of research that McKinsey did, just shows you what the top management practices are in the most agile and most successful businesses. The top three there, quite interesting. But I think when you look through that list, what's quite surprising is, how many of them are what I would call that stable backbone stuff. So stuff about having real role clarity is top of the list. Yet lots of businesses really struggle with that transition between we all do a bit of everything because we want to be flexible and dynamic into actually people need to start to focus on what their job is. That's the number one thing for the most agile and the most successful, the most healthiest businesses. When you start to look at things down the list like being operationally disciplined, being internally competitive, having meaningful values, protecting those is a challenge as you scale, as you get more and more people into the business and people that have got maybe different values. So I just thought I'd share that with you. So, can I Okay, so what I'm passing around now is just a quick checklist for you to start to take some of that thinking and start to, in your own organisation, just start ticking some boxes in these 4 areas just to get a sense of where your focus is. So if you can just take this handout that's coming round, go through each list, tick the ones that you think apply to you. You will have probably things in every single box. And just see, where are you weighted? Are you weighted in a startup, agile, bureaucratic, or are you trapped? Or as Dave McLean would probably say, fucked. Just whip through it quite quickly. You can always spend a bit more time on this after the session, but I'd just like everyone to get a quick sense of where they are, and we'd maybe just have a show of hands around the room, see where people tend to fall generally. Okay, most people got a little score. So quick show of hands. So how many people we got in the trap box? Anybody prepared to admit they're trapped at the moment? No? Okay. Yeah, we got one. We got one. So you can only improve now, can't you? Okay. What about the bureaucratic? Any bureaucracies? I would be surprised we've got too many of those today. We got a couple. Somebody from Barclays Bank, that doesn't surprise me. Okay. What about startup? Okay. Yeah, a few more. And an agile? Okay. About the same? Okay. Anybody being over-optimistic? No? Okay. So I just thought I'd let you do that, because this is quite a good exercise just to start to shape your thinking about where you are, but also maybe some of the things you need to think about to start moving to that right-hand side box. Okay, I want to share something different to you now from what we talked about this morning, which is about growth gaps. So this was a study that was done not too many years ago now, where they started to recognize that pretty much every business goes through several periods of growth, as you'd expect. But what those periods all had was a management style of evolution, but also a revolution at the end of each one before they could successfully move to the next phase. So I wanted to show this model to you because I think it's quite compelling. So what this shows is that young businesses tend to have a management style of creativity, which we won't surprise you. We've got lots of that going on in here today. But what they tend to have, because they're just founders and entrepreneurs kind of just getting stuff done and trying to sort of find a place in the world, is they tend to have a crisis of leadership. So what they tend to then do, they go through that crisis and then they kind of accept the fact they need to bring in managers that can manage things for them because it's getting too big for them to control themselves. And then they move into that second phase where it's all about direction. For those people that founded the business, it's all about how they direct those managers and direct the business to achieve what they want to achieve. But what they tend to then get is those managers get very frustrated because they're like, you've employed us to manage this business, but you're still actually controlling us. So there's a bit of a crisis of autonomy because the leadership style usually very autonomous in those situations, very, very directional. So what leaders then tend to do is they go, okay, yeah, we need to delegate leadership and power. So they let that happen. So then you get that enables the business to grow further and scale a bit more. And then the people that founded the business get a bit of a crisis of control because shit, we don't even know what's going on anymore. We've got 200 people here and all these managers and leaders, and we're empowering them to do what they need to do, and we're growing, and it's really great. But God, I'm just feel out of control. So that's when you tend to see businesses going through this coordination and monitoring phase, where that's where you get the bureaucracy coming in. Lots of processes, systems, controls, checks and measures. Just want to know what you're doing, how you're doing it. Is it going the right way? And that's the way you tend to get that crisis of red tape. So we have a lot of big businesses that are complaining, and Barclays would probably have a bit of this in their business, where they have that crisis of red tape. They just feel they're being buried in all this kind of process and monitoring. What that also then tends to do, if you can get through that, you tend to then go, okay, we've got through that, but now what we've got is people working in silos. Because big businesses, you have to focus on your own area. So I'd probably say without fail, any business of any size and scale that we work with, every single one of them complains they have a problem with collaboration. So we go from this sort of small startup scale that we're all in it together, all working as tight teams, helping each other, into we need to grow and scale and get more organized as we can't scale, but now actually we don't talk to each other. So it's like, how do we go back to some of that great stuff we had as a startup, but we still need to be properly structured and in control. So they get this kind of crisis, we go into collaboration. That, though, tends to then get to the point, and there's not too many businesses that get here, but once you've got to that point, there's not really anywhere else to go. So it's like, how the hell do we grow now? And you're probably into some very sizable businesses now. So a business like Barclays, and John Lewis talked about it this morning, is this kind of, what can we now do to form alliances outside? Because that's the only place to go now. The problem with that is you start alliancing with businesses outside, that's a bit of identity problem, because we've now got different cultures coming together and all the problems that brings. So I just thought I'd share that with you, because I've got a different view of kind of the evolution through a business cycle and some of the challenges and some of the changes that need to happen. Any thoughts in the room looking at that? Anybody recognise their businesses in that place? You're nodding heads, but I should make the share.
I'd say we're probably just about to hit phase 3. I think the crisis of control, when we're about to start bringing on some more staff, that's going to be when we start having that kind of crisis of control, where it's going to be giving more control over to people, and that's probably where it's going to start getting a bit scary. And yeah, a little bit. Kind of thinking letting someone else dealing with an important part of the business, which I've kind of dealt with since the very start, is a very kind of scary prospect.
Hi, my name's Valley. Yeah, I'm looking at startups, so I'm, probably at the first phase. But I've got clients, and they're quite large as well, and they're struggling with this crisis of identity. And it's almost how you advise them about what they should do about that and where they should go, because they started off very much as a family business, and it's got big, and they've got 500 employees now. But they still very much want to keep it that family feel. They want to keep that family business feel, but they feel again that they need to just implement corporate. So I've seen that whole scale really. So it's of interest, yeah.
Hi, I'm a startup business, and I think I'm still number one, where I still want to take control of everything that I'm doing, but I've got so many different hats that I'm doing at the moment, and it's trying to understand which ones can I delegate for somebody else to do. But then there's a cost element to that to me, because I can't afford to employ anybody. So it's a bit of a crisis at the moment, if you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. I'm just speaking to Zoe, and she says one of the things I could do is look at outsourcing, which I'd never thought about. So that's something I will think about. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so roadmap to scale. So what do you need to get it right? So this is kind of the stuff I talked about this morning, but I just thought I'd recap on it, really. So there is no silver bullet, and trust me, I spent many, many years trying to find it. And you just have to get to a point where you accept it doesn't exist. And I think Dave touched on this as well. He talked about the struggle, but it's the same thing. And I talked to Dave after the session, and he said, Dave's a great speaker and talks about the struggle, but he said actually spends a lot of his time trying to get some of this stuff right. As its CEO now, his whole job is around working on the stuff that I'm going to show you now that we looked at this morning. So we touched on this, that very simple model. I mean, if this is all you can digest for now, that's great, because if you do just get your structure right and start building a structure for the future, you were talking about, you need to get other people involved. You need to start actually, if I was you, I'd be saying, if you want to look 3 years ahead, a 3-year plan, draw the structure for 3 years' time. What would it need to look like? You know, forget about the people. Just put the roles and the things that are going to need to get done, and start thinking about how you can start moving towards that structure tomorrow. And you can't do it all because you can't go and employ everybody because you go bust very quickly. Yeah, absolutely. But it will get your mind in a place where you go, okay, I know where I'm going. I know where I'm going, and you can make decisions about who do you employ next, and what's the most important recruitment for me next, and what things I'm going to need to be thinking about in 12 months' time, and what stuff do I want to offload because I hate it, because there'll be some of that as well. Yeah. Working on your waste. I talked about James and Glide, and talked about, you know, for me the biggest success for them is quadrupling the size of their company in 4 years, but actually the staff level didn't even double. Okay, which for me is huge, and that's what waste is all about. It's, yes, you need to be looking at where we're wasteful, but what waste is really about is all that wasted potential capacity and utilization that exists in our people, in our processes, in our systems, in our tech, in our operations, depending on what you're doing. How do we free that up and get more out of the same or more out of less? Because that's the only way to go. I haven't got any stats with me, but we know most businesses that grow don't usually make any more money. In fact, many of them make less money. Because the trouble with inefficiency is the bigger you get, the more it compounds itself. Yeah? So you've got to be thinking about, how do I free up the way we work to be more efficient? Otherwise, the chances are you'll make less money. If you grow at all, you'll potentially make less money. Most people make less money. And the mindset of beliefs, you know, I think, again, Dave talked about this right at the front end of his thing, and I totally agree with him. You know, the mindset of the entrepreneur has got to be right. You know, if you're just chasing money or avoiding a job, you know, you're going to be dead in the water. But you've got also, as you scale, you've got to be thinking about the mindset of your people. They need to have the right mindset as well, and it needs to be dovetailed into your culture. So most people we could talk about culture for days on its own, but I think what most people do with culture is they kind of leave it. They just kind of think you just leave it and it just exists and it exudes from the leadership and the owners of the business. And it does in the early days, but as you get bigger, that's impossible. None of us are big enough to exude out over 20, 30, 40, 50, 100,000 people. So you've got to find a way to define your culture out and then do everything to make sure people are living and breathing it day to day, and that people that come into your organization fit that mold. And if they don't bring them in. If the ones that are in start to behave differently, get rid of them quick, because they will kill your business from the inside out very, very quickly. So that's really important. So you say just do that, but if you really want to accelerate it, you do need to be thinking about performance. I talked about it this morning. You need to be looking at all the different, I think startups particularly, and I've been there myself, our startups tend to be dominated by where we come from. So if we're techies, we'll always look at the technical performance and our platforms and our systems. If we're from a sales and marketing background, we obsess about that. If we're production people, we obsess about our operations. But the truth is, all your functions need to be working. So you've got to be thinking, across all my functions, have I got performance? And when the teams within them, have I got teams working well? Dave talked about teams. You can't do it all on your own. And at individual level, people need to be made accountable. And then again, we touched on this morning as well. Business model. I think I mentioned the Amazon model. Amazon look at their business model every single month. It's completely reversed from where it was 10 years ago, or thereabouts. You need to be given direction. I don't think I mentioned it this morning, but again, we know when you look at staff engagement, still, and it's been like this ever since I first started work 35 years ago, the biggest complaint from workers about their leadership is we don't get any direction. We don't know where we're going, and we don't know what's expected of us. So it's still to this day. You can go into any business and ask that. And I think Dave summed it up really well, and he said, we've got it in our head all the time. This is our business. We've got these visions and we've got these plans and these dreams that we just live and breathe 24/7. And we kind of expect our people just to somehow have that as well, but they don't. So we've really, and then again, the more people you've got, the harder it is for that to ooze out of you. So you've got to find a way of getting your direction down and making sure your people know it, see it, stays alive, and they start to live it with you. I'm not going to go over the others again, except what I wanted to do now is just, because we touched on this morning, but again, are there any things in here that people just maybe want to ask some more detailed questions on, or have any, just want to throw around, share? So I didn't just want this to be another half an hour of me talking at you guys again. Any thoughts? Yeah.
I was wondering if you might have touched upon this, you define your culture at the beginning, or at which stage is the optimal time to define the culture?
I think the optimal time is right at the very beginning. So probably the best example of that, if you want to do a bit of research on it, is a company called Zappos. Have people heard of Zappos? Yeah, heard of Zappos? So Zappos sold to Amazon, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. Hugely successful online retailer of footwear. There's lots of great videos online about Zappos and how he, right at the very start, defined the culture that he wanted in his business. And then he didn't just define it himself, he brought it to life in the business so that everybody that joined from day one right through to 3, 4, 5, 6 years in, they always knew what the culture was and what was expected. Remember, culture is it's not a bunch of shared values. Culture is how we behave in the business and what's acceptable for us and the way we behave with each other and how we do stuff around here. That's really what culture's all about. So yeah, for me, do it early and then keep it going, because a lot of what I talk about here is kind of like the boring stuff of how you manage a business and run a business, but the culture just kind of oozes through all of it, ultimately. So I've got businesses that do all this stuff really, really well. The culture's broken, and so actually they don't succeed. So, yeah, but if you haven't done it at the beginning, you need to define it pretty damn quick, and you need to own it and nurture it and protect it forever, really. Otherwise, because it always exists. So it's not as if it doesn't exist if you don't do anything with it. It will exist, but it will determine its own path and its own shape and its own rules. And I don't think as leaders we want that. We want to control what that looks like.
You mentioned earlier about how, as a business grows, the sort of capability of the leadership needs to grow with it, and sometimes that's you find that's a stumbling block. Could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, for those that like a reference point, it's something that we've kind of championed for forever, really. I think, but to me, it seems like common sense, because I don't think leaders are born. I just think some are made earlier than others, and I don't think anybody's born anything, really. I think, it's just a question of how early you were made. And some people are defined quite early in their lives, even when they're with their children. And I think leaders are exactly the same. So for me, it's just common sense to say, if you want to accelerate a business substantially, it's going to take a whole bunch of effort, work, skills to do it. And by definition, and leadership is the thing that will drive all of it. So for me, it's just common sense to say, if you don't do that, then you're probably going to be in trouble. But Harvard did a paper back in January of this year. They did a whole bunch of work on this. They just basically kind of put some evidence and some research behind actually saying, you cannot separate the two. If you want to change and drive a business forward, you have to up the leadership capability. So I think you should kind of talk about that a little bit more. I think for me, when we work with businesses, we refuse to separate it. So we get businesses coming to us that want to work on business improvement and scale, and we go, absolutely, we'll work with you, and we know all the things you need to do, but unless you're prepared to work on your leadership at the same time, we're not going to work with you. And we get people coming to us for leadership development, and we say, that's great, but we're only going to develop you as leaders in context of working on the business. Because if I just train you in leadership stuff, which is actually what the world's doing now, I think I mentioned this morning, but there was a horrible statistic, I should have kept it, from America last year about the billions the Americans spend on leadership development, and they can't find one tangible ROI on it at all, which is just scary. But there's tons of people with all this knowledge, and Deloitte did the thing I alluded to this morning. We actually came out of Deloitte. They did a great piece of research on this. They do it every single year. Now, all these people with all this knowledge, knowing what to do as a leader, yet in execution on a business, it's making no difference. So it's that difference between knowing what to do and then being able to do something with it. So how do I use that stuff? It's like having an MBA, isn't it? An MBA is great. I'm not deriding MBAs, but it tells you what you need to do. It doesn't actually then help you in terms of how am I actually going to use this in the real world, because there's a difference between the academia and actually the application. Does that help? Yeah.
Jason, you touched upon the fact of the mindset and the belief of the entrepreneur, because obviously, as you're sort of starting the business up, it's important to sort of start. It may not be crystal clear where you're heading. It might be quite blurred as you sort of move along the journey. But in terms of taking people with you, because obviously you may not know exactly where you're heading, but you know that this is your passion. Does that make sense? So at the early stage, how do you get people to sort of share in that?
There's passion's interesting, because passion for me is part of your purpose, and it's what Dave was talking about. Actually, I think the purpose around money and wealth is true, because most of us will be getting out of bed because we want to earn some money or we want to create some wealth for the future. But actually, the thing that really sustains you is your passion, whatever that is. But I don't think the passion's enough. So there will be people that share your passion, whether you want to, fundamentally change the way people work in the world, behave, experiences, whatever it is. And actually, passion's much easier in the third sector, if I'm honest, because I work with a lot of charities as well through our foundation, and because they've got passions that actually they're really changing the world. And in business, we're changing things, but fundamentally, ultimately, it's all driven by trying to make some more money. So it's a difficult one. But I do accept there are passions that sit behind that. I think what you need to do to get people's buy-in is you need to convert that passion into some kind of vision. And it's that, and this is what I'm talking about, having an outcome that's a bit nearer at home as well. That, in 3 years, as part of my passion, I want to create this, something that looks like this. And as I said, vision is it's clues in the name. It's a picture. It's an image. It's not some kind of, we want to be the leading provider of tech services or, leading taxi company. Uber's vision doesn't say we want to be the number one taxi company in the world. That might be one of their objectives, but that's not inspiring their people, clearly. So it's taking that passion, which is part of your purpose, and converting that into some kind of pitch that people go, I want to be there with you in 3 years' time. And then resetting that continually. No. I think people will. That people will want to go there for their own reasons, but that's about motivation, and that's a whole nother subject. Yeah. As I said, there's no silver bullet. All this stuff is really important. One more question. Anybody else got one more? If anyone wants to add anything? No? Okay. I'll start to wrap up. Okay. So I think the other thing we talked about earlier is managing your journey. So it is a journey. Dave's right. If you don't enjoy the journey, you ain't going to get anywhere, quite frankly, because it's a long journey. And I think the further you get on the journey, the further you realise you're never going to learn everything. You're never going to be perfect. So leadership capability, business improvement is kind of this ongoing life journey. So if you don't enjoy it, I get off pretty quickly. I was going to give you a simple model, not like the one I gave you this morning. If all you do in your business when you're planning is think where you are today, or where do we want to go, understand that gap, and then start thinking about how you're going to do that, you will be, as simple as that sounds, you will be way ahead of 80% of the businesses in terms of their strategic planning. I see so many businesses pontificating about what's going on in their business now and then running around trying to fix stuff without actually stopping and thinking, but where are we actually trying to get to? And understanding that gap. And again, just in terms of a slightly bigger journey, you need to have something like this. You don't need to use this particular one. But you need to have everything outcome focused. Your people need that as well. Otherwise, they will go off all over the place. You can't performance manage without it, ultimately. So you need to set that journey. You need to always be thinking, where are we? What are our challenges? Your challenges will change. Once you fix one thing, then something else will appear to be a little bit broken or could be improved. You need to be building about where you're actually going. So if you want to get to 25 million, as James did, he had to define what 25 million looked like in reality, and what things they needed to achieve. You need to plan how you're going to get there, but I highlight implement because there's a real lack of action implementation in most businesses. There's lots of really, really clever people doing lots of really, really clever business models with lots of really, really clever strategic planning, and they just don't get shit done, quite frankly. So you need to get shit done. And you need to stop and you need to learn and refine because you won't get it all right. It's too complicated. So you need that cycle of, thinking about stuff, planning stuff, doing stuff, stopping and saying what worked, what didn't work, and what did we learn from that? Okay, then what do we do now? Let's reset the journey and go again. I just put this up just very quick, just to finish. It's come out terrible on this slide, so apologies for that. So probably when you move from a Mac to a PC. But what we see with lots of businesses, they'll go in lots of spurts of activity. So I've put L&D and business improvement, but lots of businesses will have lots of initiatives to sort of drive their business forward, and they get lots of excitement and traction for a while, and then the enthusiasm dies and they fall back again. And over time, I see lots of surges and lots of falling back and very little progression. I'm being kind there by saying there's a little bit, but I think for most there's none. And our approach is that I think as a leader, you need to recognize that with your people, these 5 things, support, skills, results, reward, persistence, they're the things that lose momentum, which are trying to drive your business forward. So you need to be looking at those, when those things are happening with your teams, and you need to be intervening. You need to be going, okay, I recognize now this initiative is losing some traction. Why is it losing some traction? Are we not being persistent enough? Are my people not being rewarded? Are we not getting enough results? And then doing something before it falls right back again to kick it on again. So momentum is really important for me in Scale Up. And I think just to finish off, just what I said this morning, really, some of this stuff ain't sexy. Some of it's a bit boring. Some of it's more interesting than you might think. Some of it you'll enjoy, some of you won't, but you really do need to suffer the pain of discipline or suffer the pain of regret. Okay, so just summarizing. So know where you're going and be outcome focused. You need to evolve from dynamic to agile. There's a big difference. Understand those growth gaps and different management styles and challenges it brings. And now you've seen that, hopefully you can, as the guy said there, he's at stage 3. As you move through to stage 4, maybe try and do it in a way that won't give you that revolution requirement at the end of the next stage. Seek excellence in all areas of business improvement and make the shift. And I say seek excellence because, excellence for me is something you're always chasing. You're never going to get there. But it forces you to keep looking, keep going to the next level. Once you've got to one point, you can go, right, okay, we've got there, and actually what's the next step to get it better and better? So it's that continual journey. And as I said, be disciplined. Okay.
Bang
Thank
on
you.
time.
Thank
Bang
you.
on time. Well done,
Thanks.
Jason. Thank you, mate. I'm all right. I got me doodah. Brilliant. I'll take that off you, though, if I can. Brilliant. Top man, thank you very much. So, as ever, you can rate this session, people, on DoPoll. So, mobile devices out onto dpll.co/okbrum and get rating Jason's session. Thank you, Jason. I love the outcome focus bit. I really do. That the outcomes should drive your day. Okay, everybody done rating the session? Good. I'm not going to go for a break, okay, and I'm not going to apologize for that because we're into the home straight now, folks. That's bad news for you all, I'm sorry to say, but this is our final session of the day. So what I want to do before the final session of the day, because I recognize it's kind of that 2:15, 2:30 kind of lull. On your feet again, please, on your feet again. I started the day with a selfie. I'm going to get another one if I can, please. Right? Okay? So come on, bunch in. Bunch in. And I want arms up. I want arms up high. Okay? Are we ready? 3, 2, 1, big cheers. Hey! There we go. Right, I'll tweet that out on the hashtag OKBrum. Brilliant. Hopefully that gets everybody going again. Good. So, without further ado, let me introduce to the stage our next speaker on a really prevalent topic. You've heard a couple of people talk about it already this morning, crowdfunding. Now, he did tell me how to say his name, Emilien, but if I was feeling really fancy, I could go with Emilien. So I'm feeling fancy. Welcome, Emilien, to the stage.
Thank you very much, Lee. Thank you. Great. So Lee has kindly given me the task of conducting the graveyard shift, as I know it's commonly referred to. So I'll try and make this rather short, snappy, hopefully useful and relevant along the way as well. So before I start, who here has heard of Crowdcube before? Okay, most of you. Great. Who here is a founder or an entrepreneur? Okay, almost, yeah, a bit more than half. Who here has run a crowdfunding campaign? Oh, okay, 2 people, great. Is that rewards-based, sort of Kickstarter, Indiegogo? Okay, great. So, today we're not going to be talking about rewards, we're talking about investment crowdfunding, but hopefully your knowledge should already be great to set the scene. Before I start, I guess I just wanted to just tell you the story of Crowdcube, really. So Crowdcube was founded about 6 years ago by 2 co-founders, Darren and Luke, in Exeter, in the southwest. And they sort of pioneered the fintech revolution down south, which is not always commonly known. Darren and Luke were entrepreneurs and had sort of set up a few businesses. Darren was in the VoIP space, or VoIP, kind of before the era of Skype, had sort of exited a business, and Luke had more of a marketing background. And these guys knew nothing about finance at all. So they would what you would be calling unlikely founders to a certain extent in terms of getting into equity crowdfunding. And they really came from a simple problem. And that was the one of raising investment. Being in Exeter, there wasn't a whole lot of capital sort of flying about for early stage businesses. And Darren and Luke really found it very difficult to raise investment along their different journeys. And so one day, I mean, the story goes as Darren was watching TV one night, and I think it was Dragon's Den, and he thought one of those businesses that was turned down by the Dragons was actually really cool. And he was wondering, well, why can't I invest? I've got a little bit of money, and I think I know as better as another what is a good idea and what is a sort of good future potential business. And so they set out building an online platform. They got a couple of developers in Bulgaria to set it up in the first instance. They weren't techies. So it was a very clunky website. And actually, what they thought is they would put up businesses up on their site, people would invest, and they would make a bit of money by putting advertisers on banners and so on and so forth. It was a really terrible business model. They quickly decided, actually, no, there's a little bit, there's something different at play here, and we can really build a proper investment marketplace and be that kind of intermediary between startups and investors. So fast track, 6 years down the line, CrowdCube has raised about 200 million, just under 200 million pounds for 456 businesses. And we've got our investor base of about, well, just above 300,000 investors from across the world. And what's particularly interesting is kind of crowdfunding has taken the traditional investment circles by storm. And actually today, if you look at crowdfunding, and I'll share a few stats with you, we are, as a sort of sector, the most prolific investor at seed stage for startups. And we're the sort of third most prevalent funder as a sector for growth stage businesses. So it's really kind of changed the dynamic playing field. So what are the kind of funding options available to startups? Can anyone tell me, broadly speaking? You don't know, there are none. Okay. Okay, so traditional finance, so kind of more debt, like bank loans, that kind of thing, debt-based finance? Okay, sure. So, I mean, when I mean funding options, I mean, to a sort of startup today, if you need money for your business, what are the types of funding options that are out there in terms of sort of categories? Angel investors, so kind of equity investors, buying kind of equity in your business. Yeah. Well, okay. Well, can anyone tell me any others? Oh, kind of spoiled it. Any other funding options? Bootstrapping? Great. Well, that was my first point. One of the easiest and best ways is just go and make some revenue. Why are you worrying about who's going to be investing in your business? Just go and make it work. You know, bootstrap, get an MVP if you're a tech startup. If you're anything else, maybe, you know, dip into your savings and go and get some initial sales. Other options, debt. So, you know, traditional bank debt, great for small businesses with positive cash flows. You know, perhaps you're not incredibly ambitious, but just need to get something off the ground. Funding Circle is doing some great things there in kind of disrupting the traditional bank loan model. Grants, sometimes useful. Actually, what's more interesting about grants is more the R&D tax credits. So if you are a business or a startup and you spend any kind of money for research in development, and I say any kind of money for research and development, you can claim back some pretty attractive R&D tax credits. And an organization that sits in our building actually called Grantry really help you with that. And then the final option is equity, which we talked about. And so there you've got your kind of angel investors, your high net worths, and then you've got your more kind of traditional venture capital funds. And we had the pleasure of having Midven and a couple others on stage earlier as well. So just to give you a little bit of context in terms of what your traditional tech startup would go through as a sort of journey and where, I guess, CrowdCube lies, we're kind of a little bit before the sort of a little bit after the sort of family and friends sort of stage, all the way up to kind of Series A, Series B, Series C funding, which is kind of tech jargon for you've got product market fit and you're kind of growing really fast, so we're going to give you some money in the sort of VC world. So that's where CrowdCube lies. We basically work with companies raising anywhere between £50,000 all the way up to kind of £4 or £5 million. Actually, the largest ever raise was CrowdCube ourselves. We did a bit of a crowdception this summer where we crowdfunded CrowdCube on CrowdCube and raised £8 million from the crowd just after Brexit. So if you're going to ask me about Brexit, do I believe it's going to affect the funding landscape? Yes, in the short term, but I think what we've shown, and with ourselves as well, is there is a lot of appetite still for investing in great British businesses, and it's not because we've taken some political downturns that suddenly no one's investing in anything. So hopefully that can give you a little bit of confidence as you go on to your entrepreneurial journeys. But a few crowdfunding options. You've got donations, rewards, equity, debt. We lie in equity. We also, full disclosure, own a part of crowdfunder.co.uk, which is the UK's response to Kickstarter, and they're much better customer service. So if you do want to do rewards, go to them, not Kickstarter. Okay, who are the crowd? So this is like the kind of question I get a lot in my day-to-day life working with startups is, where is actually this money coming from? And the reality is, kind of getting your pitch ready, getting that video and all those different parts is only part of the equation. You don't sort of list something and suddenly the money flows through from the sky. There is a little bit of work to it. And typically, there are kind of three different target investor groups that you look at. The first is your crowd. And what do we mean by your crowd? We mean kind of family, friends, extended professional networks, but also perhaps the more traditional type investors that you might have encountered over time, the kind of angels or the people you might have been able to network with over time. And that is an important component of a crowdfunding campaign, that kind of being able to kind of get your crowd involved. A great other segment is customers. If you have something that is consumer facing, a lot of the people who may have tried your product or services in the first instance might also be your investors. And actually, we see that businesses with large social followings tend to do really, really well with crowdfunding. Now, that's not to say we only work with consumer-facing businesses, but it helps. And the final element is the CrowdCube crowd. And we now have quite a substantial investor base who I suppose are looking for investments in this particular asset class, repeat investors in different sectors, and kind of just enjoy investing in early-stage startups. And these people tend to resonate quite well when you're able to build momentum around those other categories and then kind of jump on board a little bit on the bandwagon, as it were. And the sweet spot is obviously at the intersection of all three. Cool. A little bit about investors. About 300,000 now. 80,000 have actually made an investment. So that's the 300,000 registered. They are mostly based in the UK because of the attractive tax breaks that are offered for startups, and work in a variety of sectors, mostly kind of tech and finance. What's actually quite interesting is what we've seen with equity crowdfunding is a completely new wave of type of investors, which we dub Henrys, so to say, high earning, not rich yet. And these are the type of people who enjoy and are excited about startups, but don't really have the money to be kind of angel investors, investing sort of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of pounds at a time. And so these are the people sort of investing around the sort of £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 mark, who perhaps have a bit of money to play around with, but just don't know where to put it because there aren't many options out there with the low interest rates and so on and so forth. What do we look for? Primarily UK companies with very simple structures. We look for very ambitious founders who have the ability to capture the crowd. So I suppose storytelling is really at the epitome of any equity crowdfunding campaign. If you can't get your friends and family excited about your idea with a simple story, then you get back to the sort of drawing board and really work on that story because it's incredibly important for crowdfunding. A complete team. I mean, we do work with single founders from time to time, and it can work if you've got a good support network. But as mentioned today, having a team behind you really does help. Has anyone heard of SEIS, EIS here in the room? A couple of you? Okay, great. Well, for those of you who don't, SEIS stands for the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme. It's basically a government-backed scheme that wants to get more investors investing in startups and small businesses. SEIS is very attractive. It gives about 50% of a tax rebate on your income tax for whatever investment you make. So invest £10,000, you get £5,000 back almost immediately, which is quite attractive, obviously. And most startups will be eligible. You just got to apply to HMRC. That's kind of it. So what do we need if you're interested in equity crowdfunding? We kind of need a business plan. If I'm honest, don't write a 72-page business plan when your startup is 2 months old. No one will read it, and it'll be a complete waste of time. Most people just want a kind of pitch deck, which is sort of well presented. And sorry, do you have a question? No, sort of well presented pitch deck, which has the sort of high level information. And if anyone is interested, they will ask you the questions. No need to give them a lot of documentation that no one will read. Financial forecast, we kind of need a financial model which showcases two things. I mean, forecasts are forecast. They are, finger in the air exercise. But what is interesting for investors is, one, how well you know your business and to what how granular you are in terms of your metrics and revenue streams and so on and so forth. And also how ambitious you are. Are you looking for a kind of a lifestyle business, or is this really a business that's going to scale and grow and hopefully bring and give back shareholder value? And then finally, kind of valuation. And by valuation, we're essentially meaning how much equity are you willing to offer for a certain amount of capital. For example, if you're offering 10% for £100,000, your valuation will be just under £1 million. So they'll typically be about 900K. The pre-money valuation is a bit of a complex art. But we can advise a little bit on that because sometimes it is really hard. Your business is very new. How do you put a value on something that barely exists? There are a couple rules of thumb, and kind of looking at comparable companies in the space is typically the best way to look at it. But if you come to us with a sort of rationale and a proposal, we can certainly give you a steer, and we capture a lot of market data, so we can give you a little bit of a benchmark in terms of how likely you are to fund by giving away this type of equity. Process, it's a 3.5 month end-to-end. Come to us, we say yes, let's move ahead. 30 days due diligence and marketing, provide all that's good, 30-day campaign. Hopefully you fund by then, and then a 30-day completion process, and we take care of the legal paperwork, the admin, the boring stuff. A few stories. This is Jem Misa. She was one of our very first clients of CrowdCube back in late 2012, early 2013. Jem Misa is a food entrepreneur. She is a mother of two and is very passionate about salad dressings and cauliflower. Her first business was Righteous, which is an innovative salad dressing brand. And after having been turned down by the banks and not necessarily having the right kind of people in her network to ask for relatively large sums of capital to get her business off the ground, after a little bit of testing and getting all the recipes right in the kitchen, she came to the crowd to basically fund her first stage of development. £75,000 got her off the ground. She got a listing in Whole Foods and then Waitrose and then a couple of others, quickly followed and was able to invest a little bit in marketing. She then came to us a little bit later on, having already a successful business under her belt, with a completely new innovative business called Collie Rice. And Collie Rice is essentially an alternative to rice. And you've guessed it, it comes from cauliflower. And it's completely patented, low in calories, high in protein. The taste is quite special, but you get used to it quite quickly. So, I definitely recommend you trying it out. And it is a great alternative to your traditional basmati rice. They did 3 rounds with us at all stages of development, and the last raise in November 2015, she raised just over £1 million, and now has about 1,500 investors across a couple of businesses. And one of the really exciting things about Jem, and I think one thing that a lot of people can learn, I mean, first of all, she's an incredible entrepreneur, but second of all, she's a very experienced crowdfunder. She's done it literally 5 times, which is the most that anyone has ever done it, including ourselves. And thirdly, she has the ability of creating and building communities. And I think this is a really important thing for especially kind of food brands, because people get quite passionate about their food. And if you're able to create a real community feel and support network around this kind of business, it can really open roads and really open doors, I mean. For example, with this particular business, I think it was kind of 2 years in, she really struggled to get a listing with Tesco's. She'd gone to Waitrose, she was in Whole Foods, even Selfridges, and a couple of big ones. But Tesco's was really on her mind, and she had really struggled to date. Had even sent the samples to the board meetings and tried all the clever tricks. She went out to her investor base. Turns out one of her investors was good friends with one of the regional buyers for Tesco's in the Southwest. Made an introduction, and 2 months later, she had a listing. And I think they're still listed in Tesco's today and doing really, really well. So, not nationwide, if you haven't seen them yet. So that's kind of where I see the power of the crowd to a certain extent. It's not just one of those 2-3 investors which might have a few connections, but actually we've got a horde of people willing to help. A couple of other examples. Adzuna, was a pretty cool business that raised with us last year. They are essentially a job aggregator. Has anyone ever heard of Adzuna? Yeah? 1, 2, okay, couple of people, great, they're making progress. And essentially, Adzuna has built some really clever technology to help people find the right kind of job at the right kind of time. One of the clever tools they've built is a CV analytics platform where you put in your CV and they tell you how much you're worth. And they even have a little section where you can email your boss and say, hey, I'm underpaid, give me a raise. And once you click on that, they also tell you, okay, think twice about the decisions you make. But very, very clever technology. And what was interesting about Adzuna is they were backed by 2 very well-known venture capital funds in London, one being Index Ventures, and had really wanted to get the crowd involved for kind of the publicity marketing end. They didn't need the money. They had investors knocking at their doors. But for them, it was really a great chance to tell their story and build their brand. And they did really, really well on the marketing side. I mean, they had some pretty high-profile investors, and during their crowdfunding campaign, they had an update every 3 days with one of their investors was saying why they invested in the business, and it was a really, really interesting exercise of brand building, marketing, and building momentum along the way. Has anyone ever heard of Camden Town Brewery? Yeah. Okay. For those lucky, those of you lucky enough to have gone to Camden Town in London. You might come across Camden Town Brewery. They are and were one of the fastest growing craft brewers in the UK. I say were because they were bought out by AB InBev last December for £85 million, which was a staggering amount when you think when you remember that they were only turning over £9 million and that they are essentially a brewery. But it's great brands which are at the heart of value in this industry. And one of the very exciting things was that in February 2015, they raised £1.9 million from over 2,000 investors who kind of believed and wanted to take part in their journey. And these guys, if you'd invested in Camden Town Brewery, would have made a 1.6x return in 8 months' time, which is it's pretty good for that kind of investment. And what was really exciting is actually that kind of crowdfunding campaign was just a great brand validation tool. They were growing fast, they had a great business, but to have all these people put their money where their mouth is was enough for AB InBev to say, wow, you guys have got a great brand, let's buy you out. And this final example is one I'm really, really excited by, and it kind of shows that crowdfunding isn't just for those fancy consumer-facing breweries or apps or you name it. This is a business called Molecular Warehouse. They are a biotech company which essentially develop biosensors which plug into your smartphone and with a prick of blood can give real-time information to doctors on specific chronic diseases. First application of which was for kidney transplants and essentially enabling doctors to monitor the effectiveness of drugs over a specific period of time and to act on that intelligence and data effectively. They were backed by a specialist VC based in Oxford and had a number of angel investors in the space. And for them, what was interesting about crowdfunding was really getting validation for what they were doing in the marketplace. To kind of tell that story and get people who were not experts at all was really, really important to them. And they ended up doing really well and actually raised £750 or just under £750,000 from a staggering amount of investors, considering no one had ever heard of them beforehand. So that's kind of me. If you're interested in having a chat, I'm around for the next sort of half an hour. If you want to take your dig at a crowdfunding campaign, it's very easy. crowdcube.com/mypitch. And you can kind of fill in initial details and essentially see if your business has legs to raise some finance. Thank you very much. I guess we have time for a few questions.
You spoke about story, like for the startups, right? So when it comes to story, what kind of structure and what kind of things to talk about and what kind of things do you guys as investors look for in the story?
Good question. So I suppose the most important thing is the people behind the business, right? So I guess one of the biggest pitfalls I see, and I think a lot of investors find, is you're very excited about what you do, and you pitch your idea, and you pitch your product, and you pitch your service, and all the benefits and all the things that go around it. But the reality is, most businesses don't have a huge amount of intellectual property, meaning that anyone who's got a bit of time and a bit of money on their hands could probably be doing what you're doing. And so I think one of the biggest things is to better understand what kind of drives you as a person, and why is your background relevant, and why fundamentally are you going to be the right person or people to drive this business forwards, and where does that ambition really lie? So I think you've got to obviously be holistic and understand all the different points, and talk about your market, and talk about your competitors, and all the rest that are on paper. But the key thing is really to come across that personal narrative, and if you can do that well, then essentially people will hopefully back you.
We'll just talk. Sorry, I tried naively our Kickstarter project ages ago, not knowing what I was doing and all, hands up. But the first thing I noticed was, thanks very much for submitting that. Give me all the details of your friends and family, and we'll chuck it out there. And I said, well, hang on a minute. If I wanted to go to my friends and family, I'd have done that first. The next thing I noticed was I got bombarded with emails with marketeers going, we can get your stuff out there, we can get your stuff out there, we can get your stuff out there. How does Crowdcube differ from Kickstarter stroke Seedrs, the Kickstarter project I was doing?
Very good question. So I suppose to differ from the sort of Indiegogo, Kickstarter, that kind of thing, we as a platform are a lot more curated. The reality is there's a lot of work that's involved in the due diligence and the marketing preparation. So we only take a select number of companies to work with because all our costs are up front. Kickstarter is completely self-service. You go up there, you set up your own page, and there are thousands of others doing the same, and you get kind of lost in the noise. So with that in mind, we try and sort of provide that kind of support along the way. And the reality is we also have a dedicated investor base which are actively looking for opportunities in different industries and have active portfolios and are sort of looking to diversify their investments. So obviously there is an important part. An important part is going out to friends, family, the wider community, and you've got to be very active on the marketing. And we can obviously support that plan, but it's a lot less kind of on your own, get hassled by marketeers and kind of just go to friends and family, and that's it, really. We've got a bit more of a dedicated base, as it were.
Oh, is it? Okay. I've got a follow-on question to that, actually.
Yes.
And it's really between you and Seedrs, because Seedrs is the other equity-based
Yes.
platform. And I think, from what I know, that what they offer is like all the investors are represented through a trustee or whatever.
A nominee.
Yeah, a nominee. And then also they have kind of a convertible type of structure. So I'm just wondering, do you think those features are a plus, or why have you kept it quite simple? And
So how do we differ, basically? Great. I guess the better way to say that is Seedrs are Indiegogo and we're Kickstarter. So we were the sort of the first platform to launch. We're the largest now in Europe. We've raised more money for more businesses than anyone else. In terms of sort of structural differences, Seedrs does act a little bit hands-on in the sense that they have a nominee structure where all the investors are held by Seedrs. They act as one individual on your cap table. We have both. You can either have a nominee or direct shareholder, and there are kind of pros and cons for both. My understanding is the restrictions around the nominee mean you are kind of tied into their platform for future raises. You have to raise your next round, or at least a portion of the sort of preemption of your round on their platform. They charge you fees on. They also charge investor fees. So if you do really well and suddenly one day someone comes and says, I want to buy your business for a couple of £1 million, and you sell, they charge a fee on investors. So we're a little bit more transactional. And it's kind of our ethos, really. We're made by entrepreneurs, and we want to make that entirely transparent and helpful for entrepreneurs. But at the end of the day, we're all growing the industry together, and to have competition is important, and we welcome it. But I suppose if you want the sort of better chances of success, the wider audience, I'm obviously very biasedly will recommend you to go to Crowdcube.
So your nominee feature is also independent per campaign, so it's not tied in for future raises.
Yes, exactly. Our nominee acts as a completely separate entity, and you come to CrownCube one day and you can do anything else later on. There's no sort of complex tie-in there. One more question. Good question. So in terms of success rates, they've changed a lot over the time, as you can imagine. So 4 years ago, it was about 25% of companies listing would successfully fund. Today, since the start of 2016, it's about 62% of businesses listing fund. And I mean, two reasons for that. One is we've become a little bit more curated and we kind of get the businesses that people look for. And the second piece is our reach and liquidity is a lot higher. So we just have more investors and more liquidity on the platform, which helps businesses successfully raise. In terms of businesses overfunding, I think once you've kind of hit your target, most businesses will overfund a little bit. I think the average overfunding today is around 140%. So most companies will overfund quite substantially. It's kind of, once you've built that kind of momentum, it's a little bit of a snowball effect and people want to, not miss out and, that kind of thing. So, hopefully you can always raise a little bit more than what you go for, and your initial target should be, as low as possible, depending on your capital requirements to ensure success. One more question? No? Okay, thank you very much. Have a great day. It was great being here.
Emilion. Even fantastic. That was terrific. Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. So, well done. You made it to the end of the day. Give yourselves a round of applause. I like that. Fantastic. Okay. Before we wrap up, you've all been doing your do polls. It'd be really interesting to get a bit of a summary of what you all think of today and what your feedback's been. So over to Steve, who's going to give us a bit of that. All right?
Hello all. I know I stand between you and beer. I stand between myself and whiskey. It's an horrific place to be. But with my able man, Chris, he's the brains behind this, if I'm honest. We're going to run through, I know I did a lot of it earlier, but I thought it'd be really nice just to wrap up by touching on it. So the very first question of the day, who is here? Primarily entrepreneurs. No surprises there. If we scroll on down, this was one of my most interesting questions of the day. And I think that if anyone's especially gone from that startup point to get into scale and trying to scale, this is when suddenly those little things about your co-founders start bugging you a bit more. And for others, it'll start really getting on your wick. So that was good to see that most people are still getting on. 65%. So a year or more, we're looking at 9 months. I don't think, you were talking earlier, Jason, about a 3-year plan, yeah? A 9-month runway for most of the people. It's like, that's fairly hairy, yeah? So get bloody selling. Get more of that revenue coming through. And then from Jason's talk, which I really enjoyed, the majority of you were feeling that. So the nice, interesting touch point here was that when Jason asked, and you were being public in front of everyone else, the majority of hands that went up said agile. Yeah, we're agile. We tick all those freaking boxes. We've got this. In honest response on Dupo, most people were saying, over half of people were saying they were startup. And rating your business at the moment. So the mindset of the team was the bit you were nailing, but reducing wasted effort was where you were struggling. So you're putting too much time into too much stuff that doesn't bring you enough in return. So stop doing it. Focus on the thing you're best at. Very quickly on the next 4. So the investment readiness session was the top-rated one. But by now, obviously, not many people left. And obviously, these are all quartered out as well into the sessions. So if we scroll down, sorry. And so haven't you heard from Emilion? Is he still around? Vous êtes là ici? Vous parlez français, Emilion? Ah, magnifique. Voilà. 83% of people are a lot more likely to go for crowdfunding after hearing your talk. What would you like to get out of the day? So learning about growing business and being inspired are the top things. I hope you've got it. I certainly have. I've got that in bucket loads. And then feedback. So I just want to say, from a Dupol point of view, thank you very much. You've been very kind. 84% have enjoyed it. And yeah, 89% of you thinks it's been an extremely good day. And I'd concur with those. Thanks so much.
Out of 6 responses, who's the git?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much, Steve. Top man. So if we can just flick back ever so quickly. Have we got the clicker? Thank you very much, top man. Super duper. So really, I am honestly the last thing to stand between you and the pub. And I'll be going to the pub. Don't worry, I've been working pretty hard on this. It would be remiss of me not to thank every single speaker and collaborator that we've had here today, right through from Dupol to Jason to all the other people that I can see in the room, our wonderful exhibitors as well, and even the guys who've been over on the other building doing the other seminars as well. I think they've done an absolutely fantastic job. Thank you so much to them. I just hope you as the entrepreneurs are going to take something away. You've learned something. You're going to do something differently. I'm seeing some nodding heads. That's fantastic. There's a lot of support available for you in this city to take you on to the next level. From us at Entrepreneurial Spark and NatWest, right the way through to all the great resource that you've got going on in this building. Talk to people, make use of it, okay? Because it's there to support you. And a hell of a lot of it's free, to be honest. So get cracking. It's the Sack of Potatoes, by the way, if anybody'd like to join us. That's where we're off to just now for a pint. So look forward to seeing you there, and thank you very much for coming along today. Cheers all.